I think we're on.
Right.
We're waiting for the radio guy to catch up with us because we're doing a simultaneous broadcast. If you're getting this on YouTube, we're going to start the show in just a minute. Grab yourself a cup of coffee, and we'll be on in about 30 seconds or so, I think.
Thank you. Yeah. Once in a while.
Yeah. How's a world of mayhem and murders?
Busy.
Yeah.
They keep doing it.
There was like 2 more yesterday.
Yeah, and I think that the report in the paper today was a house fire. They have the people inside that were bound and
They were beaten. And
yeah,
there was a murder. The only fire was set to cover a home invasion.
right.
Which would make a great thing to talk about next week, that we don't know what happened. So,
Yeah.
Las Vegas is full of crime at the moment.
You say go.
Good evening and welcome to Fired Up. This is Bob Irwin, your host for the show. We're coming to you from the gun store here in Las Vegas, actually from the gun store. We have a little studio in the back of the store we use now for these broadcasts. You are listening to us on KSHP Radio, or on YouTube at Fired Up with Bob Irwin. That's easy for me to say. We are here every week. We put up a new, the radio show now is simultaneous with the YouTube. So we're putting up a new YouTube show on Tuesdays. Most of the stuff out there says Wednesdays, but it's the same show. They stay up there forever, as you regular people know. You go to our YouTube station, YouTube Fired Up with Bob Irwin, and you will see all our shows back to show number 2, because we can't find show number 1 somewhere. It's in somebody's filing cabinet. Anyway, with me tonight are a couple of guests. We have murder defense attorney Clark Patrick sitting next to me, and we have firearms instructor and actually terrorism expert Lenny Davis, who just called, and he's tangled up in traffic and will arrive momentarily, unless that's who you're grinning at off camera. Okay, well, Lenny is here too. So you made it, Lenny. Just put your shirt on and come on to the set.
Keep your shirt on, you'll be all right.
Clark, can you give us a bit of your background for the listeners that aren't familiar with you?
Sure, Bob. I grew up in Montana, been around firearms my whole life, hunting. Did a stint in the Army, commanding tanks. After that, I went to law school, and for the last 10 years, I've been practicing here in Las Vegas, solely murder defense.
A interesting and difficult occupation.
Always interesting.
And sliding in is Lenny Davis. Lenny, I've had on the show as a firearms instructor. He works for the State Department, worked for the State Department as a contract firearms instructor, teaching embassies and other witness protection people and so forth in foreign countries how to prevent terrorist acts or combat terrorist act. And perfect guy. If you've read the paper, we've had some interesting incidents in the last 3 or 4 days, with more apparently to come. So I asked Lenny to come right back. He was on the previous show, so we could talk about this particular problem, the acts of terrorism and so forth. I didn't do you justice. If you want to give a little bit of your background related to this, is probably more important.
Well, like Bob, thanks, Bob. Sorry I was late, folks. Traffic's crazy. No, my name's Lenny Davis. I'm a retired special agent with U.S. Customs, Department of Homeland Security. And since 2008, I've been a subject matter expert and instructor, contract instructor for the U.S. Department of State in the Global Anti-Terrorism Assistance Program. So I've Got a little bit of background.
So you work for Hillary?
No, I worked. Well, okay. All right, I'm quitting now. No,
Try and get around that, folks. He's doing the best he can.
best I can do.
The
I didn't know this was going to be one of those.
we got to keep the fun in the show, and picking on you on camera is one of the more fun things I get to do all week. We always start out the show with talking about a couple of firearms cases that involve self-defense, and I want to do a couple of those first. We always want to start with some things for our listeners' education and use of firearms for self-defense. We do some cases that are good self-defense and some that are questionable, and once in a while one that's pretty stupid. But I want to talk about a couple of those first. This was kind of all over the news. This is WSVN TV 7 in Miami, reported on the 10th. Some criminals apparently picked the wrong house to attempt to break into, as they were nearly shot by an elderly woman. The burglars did not consider that when they kicked in the door of this Miami home, an 88-year-old woman might be waiting for them behind the door with her firearm. According to the Miami Police Department, the burglars attempted to enter her house on Northwest 2nd Street at 10:30 p.m. When they kicked in the door, the elderly woman fired her .25 caliber Beretta into the door from the inside. The would-be home invaders turned and ran off. According to the Miami police, he never made it into the building. The shocked neighbors have since stepped up and helped the resident with repairs to the door, replacing the broken lock and so forth. Her bullet didn't go through the door, or this story might have ended up in being quite a different homicide investigation. They weren't able to make off with anything this time, because as soon as she fired the round into the door, they ran. But police believe it's the same two that burglarized her house 2 weeks earlier. During that incident, they stole one of her guns. That's probably why she shot at him with a .25. Didn't have anything bigger left. Anyway, police have checked the area to see if they could find anybody responsible for the home invasion, with no luck at all. They got away with stuff once. They came back. Bullet came through the door. They ran off. Likely they're going to be back a third time.
Probably not so much. They're figuring maybe she'll get a bigger gun that may penetrate the door next time.
Yeah, I would think.
And we've, the fact that she shot into the door, we've talked about this before. The fact that they kicked the door in and were on their way in, she's okay shooting through the door. Had they not kicked the door, and if they were outside and she didn't know who it was, then you probably don't want to shoot through the door, and you can just scare them off with,
you want to yell, get out of here.
Get out of here, I have a gun. But once they kick the door in and they're on their way in, then
well, these two heroes took off when they heard the shot.
Well, of course, they
So
always do.
obviously they didn't get hit because the bullet was still stuck in the door. So
Figured they got her gun the first time, so they maybe thought she didn't have a second one.
and that always begets the comment, what if the woman had no gun? Then they kicked the door, and she's 88 years old.
This would have probably turned out a lot worse. It would have been a
Yeah.
homicide investigation, but probably not against the.
But it would have
Home
been
invaders.
her homicide they're trying to solve. On that light, we do offer ladies only shooting and personal safety class here at the gun store, taught by Maggie Mordaunt, who's a really well-known local instructor. Next class available is on December 10th. It's a Thursday. You can find information on how to sign up for the class and so forth at our website, thegunstorelasvegas.com. Probably she wouldn't have shot through the door if she took that class. But, you don't ever argue with a 88-year-old lady
With a gun.
with a gun. There aren't much you're going to tell her.
Can I add, will somebody in Miami who's a gun dealer go see this lady and get her a real gun, please? Okay?
I suspect somebody may have.
They may have already, but I know if that probably would have happened here, there would have been several.
Yeah, I mean, we see that, and I know gun dealers that call them.
Yes.
I've seen people do that and called them and invited them to our classes just for that reason. And they go, yeah, where are you? And, it goes downhill. But this is another story I want to make sure I cover tonight. In Latson, South Carolina, this is WCSC Live News. Deputies report a 13-year-old boy was home alone when a vehicle pulled up behind his house. One of two suspects in the car attempted to get into the home, at which time the teen got his mother's gun and began firing. Children and guns. The Charleston County Sheriff's Office said he saw a subject out back trying to get inside, so he fired his mother's gun through the door, and the subject reportedly fired back. Interesting problem when you fire through a door. The subject dropped his pistol and fled to the waiting vehicle. Authorities report apparently the juvenile stepped outside and fired several more rounds at that vehicle as it drove away. Deputies responded to the home just before 2 in the afternoon on report of shots fired. The incident report says a 13-year-old boy was asked to come out of the home, and the boy exited the home without incident, put the gun away, obviously. Several neighbors reported to the detectives they heard gunshots. They saw a small gray car pull out near the home and speed away. A short time later, actually, when I read the whole thing, it was about 45 minutes later, gray Chevy Sonic arrived at Trident Hospital with several bullet holes in it. The passenger in the car had 3 gunshot wounds. He was rushed into ER in critical condition and subsequently died from his wounds. The coroner's office identified him as a 31-year-old local from nearby Somerville, South Carolina. The driver of the car, a 28-year-old from North Charleston, told deputies that someone had shot his car while driving on the interstate. Being aware of the earlier incident, the investigators arrested him. He's charged with first-degree burglary, possession of a firearm during commission of a violent crime. Deputies located a Colt .45 pistol in the area where the boy said the suspect had been trying to enter the home. The family left the home for the night, saying they didn't feel safe at home anymore. We can understand that. Neighbors were thankful for the boy's quick action. The sheriff's office is investigating. For all you gun guys out there, they didn't say it was a 1911. I would assume it wasn't a Colt single action, but it was a probably a 1911. When the kid fired, they dropped their gun and ran, kind of like the 2 guys, but they didn't leave their gun with the old lady. They just ran.
Yeah, this one has a little more problems than the first one because it doesn't say how far into the house this guy had come. If he was still out in the patio just trying, then a verbal warning, I have a gun, leave. The fact that as soon as the shot rang out, he dropped his gun and left, the verbal warning would have probably been enough.
Well, I would assume it would, but again, Clark, this is a 13-year-old.
It's a 13-year-old, and that's probably and that's probably going to save him on the second half of this, where he starts firing at the leaving car.
He went out and fired at the fleeing car.
Had this been an adult, he'd have some problems with that, both with the police and certainly with civil suits. But the fact that he's only 13 may be the thing that will save him on this whole incident.
Yeah, and the question is, should teenagers know how to use a gun? Well,
absolutely.
They should, and they do. They do video games. They do pretend guns at all the arcade games, have these guns and whatever, and have BB guns and so forth. Is a courageous kid, and imagining the bad things that would have happened
again had he not been armed.
He didn't know how to use the gun and didn't have the mother's gun there to defend himself. Like I say, I see the downside of this, of a 13-year-old kid now realizing that he's killed somebody.
Right.
And we will hope that the local police will treat it like an officer shooting and get the kid some counseling and help to.
And if they don't, hopefully his parents will.
Yeah, to get him through this, because this can put a terrible mark on a kid, as opposed to him being dead. So it's.
Well, I think and that's going to be a lot of it, is you explained to this young man, you or him could have just as easily be you dead.
Right.
You did the right thing, maybe not completely by the letter of the law, but he did the right thing. He had enough presence of mind, and you were talking about should you train your kids to shoot that? Well, I have 2 adult daughters who, when they were teenage daughters, knew how to run and operate a weapon system, a couple of different weapon systems, because I wasn't always there and what I used to do for a living. So I never had to worry about my kids at that point.
Yeah, and the same with us. We taught our kids, and not only is it teaching them how to defend themselves, but it's teaching them that the gun is in the house and that it is dangerous and how to properly handle it. And that keeps them from finding it and going, oh, and shooting their friends or shooting themselves because they don't understand how that gun works.
Yeah, I was very, with my first daughter, I was very much, she was like, I said, these things are dangerous. If you want to see one, let me know and I'll make it safe. And I did. And my daughter would come to me if I got a new gun and yeah, which was occasionally.
That's good.
Yeah. And she'd come to me and say, Dad,
Tuesdays, yeah.
well, it wasn't quite that bad. But Dad, can you make this safe and let me look at it? And I would do that and hand it to her and she would look at it and she'd go, okay, Dad, thank you. And never really want to see it again. So you take that mystique away from it, I think, instead of trying to hide everything and okay, don't touch that, to explain to them. They're a lot smarter than you give them credit for.
Well, they are. And obviously a teenager he was responsible with the gun. It's funny because we've had kids like this, 14 and 15, come to concealed weapon class with their parents when they can't get a concealed weapon, but their parents want them to learn the rules of engagement, all this kind of stuff for real, not what they see on video games and so forth. And it's very helpful. We teach a safety class for little kids to stay away from guns and things, but the teenagers are welcome to come to the concealed weapon class and sit through it. Because it teaches the rules of the road. All those classes are on our website, thegunstorelasvegas.com. And I should mention, because we're not doing call-ins now on the radio, if you have a question or comment, you can text or email to bob@firedupmail.com. That's on this side of my cutesy sign. Question or comment can go to there. If it's a question for one of the guests or for one of our attorneys, we will forward that. You can just send everything to that, bob@firedupmail.com, and we will take care of it. If you want to reach Lenny, same routine. We will forward the mail to him. I want to jump now. I spent a lot of time working on Shoutline before the events happened. The Guardian, the British news publication, reported in its U.S. Website this week an arsenal of weapons deployed, and we're talking about the incident in Paris, deployed by the 8 attackers to terrorize Paris on Friday night were underlined by France's gun control problems and raised the specter of further attacks, obviously. The country has extremely strict weapons laws, but Europe's open borders means assault rifles are relatively easy to come by on the black market. I've spoken to people over there about that issue, and they said basically for about $1,000 American, you can buy an AK anywhere, kind of like here with pistols and whatever. Military grade guns, anything military grade is banned in France. And if you want to own a hunting rifle or a handgun, you have an incredibly strict background check to get through and a mental health check. Part of the interview, I ran across a French policeman who was talking to Reuters. He said in Marseille, the surrounding areas almost all scores are settled by using weapons used in wars. He added, if you don't have a Kalash, you're considered a bit of a loser. A lady named Kathy Lynn Austin is an arms trafficking expert. In an interview with Al Jazeera, she said one of the reasons we see a lot of Kalashnikovs, AK-47s, on the black market is because Russia has upgraded to the newer version of the Kalashnikov, the AK-74s and so forth, and it's created a massive stockpile of older AKs that are sitting in unguarded warehouses mostly, or you can bribe the guard and run off with a truckload of them. The problem here is that the unarmed population invites attacks. I'm sure the two gentlemen with me agree with that statement and will have their own take on it, but more or less, France is a giant gun-free zone except for the criminal gangs. So they don't have secure borders. bad people come across, and contraband goes both ways. Does it sound like any place we know?
Well, they don't have a 4473. We have that.
Yesterday, Islamic State warned in a new video they released that countries taking part in the airstrikes against Syria would suffer the same fate as France, and specifically threatened to attack Washington, D.C. The video, which appeared on a site used by Islamic State to post messages, begins with news footage in the aftermath of the Paris shootings, which at least 129 people, as we know, were killed, actually more now. The message to the countries involved was what it called the Crusader campaign was delivered by a man dressed in fatigues and a turban, identified as an Algerian. We say the states that take part in the Crusader campaign that by God you will have a day, God willing, like France's, and God, as we struck in France in the center of the abode in Paris, then we swear that we will strike America in its center, Washington. The man is quoted as saying. We are under a terrorist threat. My opinion is that's likely to change the whole direction the United States is going. Clearly, Washington, D.C. will be a target. These guys, these murdering jerks we're bombing their capital city. Of course, they're going to bomb ours. And New York is the next major target, according to experts. After that is Chicago, because there's great symbolism for those two cities. And guess what is number 3? Las Vegas, Nevada, where we're sitting at the moment. Lenny, I want to ask you first. I know I asked you to look into this, whether you believe this is a likely event that this will continue, that we're looking at more attacks. And Bud, you've been there and done that. You've talked to these people. You've talked to the good guys over there many times, spent countless days and weeks and months in all of these countries. You have the floor. What do you think?
Well, it's not if, it's when. These people are dedicated. They are driven. They're insane, but they're dedicated and they're driven. We have an open society. And yes, people, I would love to be able to say, oh just bring everyone here and we can take care of that. We are leaving ourselves open for target. Now, am I one to say, no, you should stay at home and close your doors and belt yourself in? No, I'm not. I look at what we are, as much as people don't want to admit it, we are in a war. It's going to be a long war. It's not going to be 1 or 2 administrations deep and be over with. I wish we had, a la World War II, Germany and Japan, defined states and defined borders, and those were our enemy, and we're going to go get them. Well, unfortunately, we're fighting a war with as equally as nasty and ruthless as an enemy as they are, or as the Nazis and the Japanese were in World War II. But they're really sort of stateless. Yes, they have parts of Iraq, they have parts of Syria, but they have people everywhere. We are going to be the victims, unfortunately, and I wish I was wrong, but I know in my heart of hearts, and my training, knowledge, and experience tells me we are going to be victims of attack somewhere in this country, like Paris. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. We're a free society. I don't think that Washington, D.C., New York, Chicago, major metropolitan areas are as good a target as, say, we are here, or any small city in the United States. These guys prey on soft targets. Look at Paris. It was a concert, rock concert. It was cafes. Three guys tried to get in with suicide vests and tried to get into the soccer stadium. Thank goodness that the security was good at the soccer stadium. Of course, when you have the president and the former president there, the security is really usually good. But they stopped these guys. One of these idiots allowed himself actually to be patted down before they discovered it, which makes you want to believe. And as I well know, some of these people are not exactly rocket scientists. It's going to happen here. One of the things that we have going for us here that they don't, that say the citizens of Paris don't, at least here in Nevada, where you can have a concealed weapons permit with some training and background checks and going through the proper channels, you can carry a concealed weapon. That is your lifeline, folks. That is going to be the difference between you and somebody in Paris. And people go, I've already had this discussion with a couple of people, and they said, well, you're sitting in a cafe and somebody opens up with an AK-47. Okay, yeah, you're in a bad spot. But somebody there on the street at that cafe also could have just as easily broke that attack, even armed with a handgun, shooting at these guys. In the two previous criminal things that we saw, and we talked about this evening, first shots go at these guys, and what do? They break and run. Now, yes, some of these guys are very well-trained fighters, but a lot of these guys are not. I just came back from Tunisia. I spent 6 weeks in Tunisia. Some of the greatest people on the planet. Some hardworking, dedicated, peace-loving people who unfortunately have some psychotic neighbors in Libya. They've had 2 attacks in in Tunisia. The guys went to Libya, they got some training, they came back. Unfortunately, they picked soft targets that didn't have people that were armed. I trained some of the anti-terrorism teams that a lot of the men in the anti-terrorism teams that went in these 2 incidents and killed these guys. Very brave men, especially in the Bardo Museum shooting. It's going to happen here. You cannot, your personal safety has to be your responsibility. You cannot wait for the police to arrive. In these things, and it's an old saying, but it continues to be exactly what the simple truth, as I'm always saying on my Facebook page. It's the simple truth. When seconds count, the police are minutes away. Police are very good at getting there and picking up the bodies, but to stop that, someone has to be there with a gun, has to be trained, and has to put rounds downrange. It's the only way it's going to happen. You're going to stop this. This is an unpredictable sneak attack, if you will. This could be a Pearl Harbor that could break out anywhere, and you can't wait for the U.S. Navy to be there with a battleship.
Yeah, one of the CIA retired guys that I saw interviewed said that they felt that was ISIS smoothing out their playbook as to what works and what doesn't work. So they got, for the manpower they've spent, they got the most casualties by using simple tools, just walking in and shooting innocent civilians to terrorize the people of France. And they got a different response, I think, than they expected, with the French realizing that they're at war and going after them full bore every way they possibly can. In the United States, we have weapons so we can defend ourselves. You're going to have a rifle in your house, and this, that, and the other thing, depending on the state you live in or the city you live in. 2 of the alleged most open targets have the strictest gun laws, DC and New York City, and the third one, Chicago. So maybe they'll pick those before they pick something else, because they are the soft targets. The question would be, and I'm gonna put you out on a limb here.
Won't be the first time.
No, it is for Clark. When
No.
we have that type of incident and people come, and they're running into your house, you see a guy running away from a shooting with an AK-47, are we at liberty in a war situation like that to fire in defense of others when, the bad guy has simply shot 3 people and is running the other direction? We can't possibly handle that mayhem through what I see as the way our criminal justice system works. Now, we're going to arrest all these guys and, pick juries that have never heard of terrorism and, and put them all on trial. This is a war. That's when the bad Nazi guy was shooting at citizens and GI showed up, they just shot him, right? They didn't have a trial. They didn't try to arrest him because they realized these guys, their mission is to kill us. Ours seems to be to pat them on the head and get along with everybody, but that's probably for another show. But if that comes to that, we actually have that type of mayhem in the street during an attack, what happens?
Well, I think you're right. I think it's war. It's not a burglar. It's not a home invader. It's an enemy combatant. And I would like to think that armed citizens of the United States that are carrying their concealed weapons permits can fire back. And it's clear, we've talked about this before, defense of others. Sometimes if you don't know all the parties, it's not clear who the bad guy is. But in this situation, when somebody's carrying a fully automatic Kalashnikov, it's pretty clear who the bad guy is. And I think
wearing a mask,
and a turban,
heading for the school or wherever.
Yeah, I think
he's a target right there. You got to yell, drop the gun or I'll shoot.
I'll shoot. And if he doesn't, then I think
the question is, do you have to yell, drop the gun or I'll shoot? Even if it's not,
I don't
the cops
think so.
wear black. If it doesn't say police on his chest, the cops would shoot him.
Right. I don't think you have to even give them a verbal warning. I think you can because, or else we're going to run into the same thing Paris is. And Paris is in a state of war. And I think the president is exactly right on that. And it would be nice if they would maybe now loosen some of their weapons bans and controls and arm some of these citizens. So the next time they come and you know who the bad guy is, you just shoot them. You protect yourself, you protect your country, you protect the people next to you. And it's no different than,
well, as I said earlier, quickly, one of the news reports was that the French are doing exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
They're going around picking up guns. So
they're making a soft target even softer.
And I think one of the things that you've got to realize when I say, if you're carrying your gun, I'm not saying if there's a carload of guys, of ISIS guys that show up with AK-47s, you should jump out there with your Glock 43 and engage these guys. When I say you're carrying your gun, that should be your personal protection. That's my protection. If you're a victim of one of these attacks, if you don't mind me expanding a little bit on where
Go
I'm
ahead.
at, if you're the victim of one of these attacks, you've got to think about your safety and the safety of your family. The Department of Homeland Security's put out a program, a training video. The city of Houston did it. It's called Run, Hide, Fight. Run, hide, and fight. Those are your 3 options. Bar none. Those are your 3 options. First thing I always tell when I teach people firearms, distance is life. The distance from the more distance you can get from your antagonist, you are going to exponentially save your life. Same thing in a situation like this. Get away from these guys. Get away from them. Get away from them. If you can't get away from them, hide. One of the things that my friends from the anti-terrorism national police in Tunisia told me, I had several nights where I could sit down with these guys, and it's one of the things I loved about my doing that job is I get to train these guys and then things happen after I train these guys, and I get a real
and say what worked, what
didn't work, and these guys are the Bardo Museum, and I was just there a few weeks ago. The Bardo Museum's a magnificent museum. It's huge. It's 4 levels. It's a huge museum. There are hundreds and hundreds of ancient Roman mosaics and art from different eras in Tunisia's history. 2 guys, AK-47s, killed 19 people in there. 2 days after these guys, the battalion anti-terrorism, the BAT, they showed up. They neutralized these guys fairly quickly. I mean, they got there and they took these guys out. Unfortunately, 19 people died before they could get there in a very short period of time. They were as fate would have it, they were less than a mile away, getting ready to do a training operation, and they got the phone call. So, boom, they hit it. They got these guys. They're still clearing the museum 2 days later, and they find a Spanish couple who had been hiding that entire time. So if you can't get away from these guys, conceal yourself, hide. And the last thing is fight. It's a last resort, but it's fight. And I would much rather be able to fight somebody with a handgun that I've trained with and I carry legally concealed than say this coffee cup.
But if the coffee cup's all you got, you run what you brought.
Yeah. I always tell guys to be I tell people be situationally aware. How many times, folks, do you go down the street, and I see it here all the time in Las Vegas, and I'm driving down the road and I'm stopped at a stoplight, and here comes 4 or 5 people, and they're either on their cell phone or they have their music in their ear. They didn't look right or left. They just stepped off the curb. They're not situationally aware. You have to be aware of your surroundings, especially if you're in some place that is going to be a soft target for these things. You've got to put your head on a swivel. I'm not saying that you have to be, ready to go at a moment's notice, but you have to be aware of things. And if you see something, and I'm sorry, I sound like a Department of Homeland Security poster boy, but
well, you are.
Well, in a way I am. But if you see something, say something. Call the police. Go, hey, I just saw this guy set this bag down and he walked away from it. If somebody would have realized that in Boston at the marathon, that's exactly what the Tsarnaev brothers did. They sat those bombs down and that backpack, and they walked away. I'm very, of course, because I travel a lot, if somebody in the airport, they say unattended bags. I mean, if somebody gets up and walks away and leaves a bag there, I'm really kind of on top of it. I'm like, sir, did you forget your bag? And if he goes and looks at you kind of scared and runs off, you hit the other way.
That's a clue.
That's what we call the business a clue. But no, you got to be situationally aware, folks. And I'm going to tell you, it's going to happen here. It's not if, it's when.
Yeah, unfortunately, I believe you're correct. I'm just overwhelmed with the danger that's here, and looking at the crowd that you're talking about, and that's where we have so many pedestrians run over. If you're not from Las Vegas when you're hearing this, we have a pedestrian killed once a week in Las Vegas.
Once a week.
It's probably more, where they're run over crossing the street, and they are usually it's against the law to drive while you're texting. Unfortunately, it's not against the law to walk while you're texting, but any major store you're in, people walk right into you because they're walking and reading their cell phone. I've watched them walk into walls and displays, and they're just absolutely unaware of their surroundings. And if we're in this situation where, especially where we've got these lone wolves or the small groups, the lone wolves are a problem because there's no way to detect those, like the guys in Houston, that fortunately a stand-up cop was paying attention.
A 60-year-old motorcycle officer So in other words, I'm 60 years old, so folks don't mess with a 60-year-old man with a handgun because he took 2 guys out.
If you don't remember that, they're going to a museum or something to attack, and they jumped out of their car, and this guy is a motor cop, and he drew his handgun and killed them both. Bang, bang, just like that. And that would be a real shock to them that, well, in Texas, people shoot, and an old cop in Texas is going to be an IPSC shooter or something like that. Most of them are. And, when you see the tricked out 1911 in his holster, he can shoot. I wouldn't have that. The trick is not the guy who has 18 magazines. He generally can't shoot. He wouldn't need all those bullets,
Guy's got a revolver. And he's got some time on him. Be very careful.
I'm just, I'm concerned that these are going to happen, and it's going to turn our society right on its head.
Well,
that if it goes as badly as it could, ISIS isn't going to surrender.
No, they're not going to surrender.
We cannot beat them into submission. We cannot threaten them into submission. And, I can say that on the show. We have a commander-in-chief who doesn't believe they're really dangerous and wants to be friends with everybody. And they're trying to kill us. They're not trying to convert us. They're trying to kill us.
Last night I was doing some research before I came over because you asked me about some things. So I was looking at some other media outlets, and I was looking at the lovely Rachel Maddow show. And she had a guy on there, and one of the explosives that they used in these Paris attacks is an explosive, homemade explosive called TATP, triacetone triperoxide. She made this huge, she was trying to do the one thing. She was saying, well, where's this bomb factory? TATP is so hard to make, and it's so unstable, and where is this bomb factory? Well, I got news for you, Rachel. There are national police officers in Tunisia, national police officers in the Philippines that I know who are victims of damn near everyday attacks with TATP. It is very easy to make, and it is not the most stable stuff in the world, but if you're not playing basketball with a beaker of it, you're probably okay. But the point I'm trying to make was was really the counterpoint that she was making. She was trying to say, well, this was, it's Europe, and they must have got a hold of some military explosives, and they must have been trained, and it'll never happen here. No one knows how to do that. It's, they just got lucky. And I got to tell you, folks, they were not, per se, military. They're not special operators. Thank God they're not, or they'd probably still be shooting with them right now. This was a Mumbai, India style attack. It worked very well. They had no reason to get away. They knew they were going to commit suicide. They were all wearing suicide belts. A great thanks and a big hug to the RAID unit. The RAID unit is the French Police National Terrorism, Anti-Terrorism Assistance, or Anti-Terrorism. It's basically their Delta Force Navy SEAL for the National Police. They didn't wait around. The longer you wait in that situation, they knew they had somebody in there had over 100 hostages. They didn't wait. They made a plan. They decided. They moved. They got in there. Yes, they knew they were going to get some hostages killed, but they knew waiting was not the case. They did a marvelous job, from what I'm hearing from some of my contacts that are getting some information directly from France and their close investigation. These guys did a marvelous job. They saved a lot of people. We're going to lose innocent people in this. This is their whole idea, is to kill innocent people. They won't go to the police station. They won't go to an army base. They won't go and say, okay, FBI, I'm going to go to your office and shoot it out. They're going to go to the mall. They're going to go to a sporting event. They're going to go to Las Vegas. This is my nightmare, because there are people here that are going to get injured and killed if an attack like this happens. I know clear back in 2008 when Mumbai was going on, Las Vegas Metro, much to their credit, sent some of their officers to Mumbai, studied what it is. I know they have a plan in place for that. But folks, you've got to understand, when seconds count, the police are still minutes away. And in a giant resort, like say, any of these mega resorts, when the police show up in the driveway, it could be hours before they get to you somewhere in that resort. And it's up to you. It's your life you're protecting, and it's up to you to protect it. So you need to take those steps to do that. And I, as much as I hate to say that I don't want to be doom and gloom, but the Israelis have been doing this for years. I mean, 4 years, and the majority of the Israeli citizens are armed. Majority of the attacks that they've had, now they've had some attacks lately that have been, and we had one in California last week. The media will not, and I'm sorry, I'm getting a little upset because it really upsets me. This kid in California went to a college with a knife and attacked a whole bunch of people. Exactly what he saw. And yes, he was of Arab descent, and yes, he's a jihadi, but nobody wants to admit that in the mainstream media. Heaven forbid that our commander-in-chief's narrative about how things go is not correct. This kid went on that campus, took a knife, and injured several people before the police got there and shot him. It is exactly what the jihadis and the Hamas was having people do in Israel, a different kind of attack.
They can't get guns, they'll use whatever's handy. In 2003, one of the most chilling things that I have ever came across, and we teach this in the anti-terrorism assistance program to the police. 2003 in Iraq, special operators raided a place. They got a manual from Al-Qaeda, and Al-Qaeda says, use what you have. Don't get worried so much about using airplanes into buildings or dirty bombs. Those are all considerations. Use what you have in your local area. You don't have to worry about long logistics lines. You don't have, and again, you get some dedicated people. They don't have to have machine guns and bombs. If they have weapons, they're going to cause casualties. And that's the whole idea. That's what these guys want to do. And it's shameful, it's dirty, and unfortunately, our current administration wants to call it everything from workplace violence to, oh well, he had a bad day. These are attacks by a group of people, and believe me, I have some wonderful friends throughout here and throughout the world that are Muslims. It is not the Muslim religion. It is sideways just absolutely sideways, insane people who have taken what they have read in the Quran, or somebody has told them in the Quran, and they have twisted it to make their own little agenda and to fit their own way of thinking. It's wrong. It's wrong for everybody in the United States to think that every Muslim's bad, because they're not, folks. I work side by side with some of the greatest cops in the world, and they're Muslim. They have their faith. But they're some of the greatest cops in the world. But there are radicalized Islamic jihadists in this country, and they are going to attack. I'm trying not to be, I don't want to be Chicken Little. The sky is not falling, but folks, it's coming. It's not if, it's when. And that's really what it is. So, given that, if we have an incident here or in the town you're in, you want to be able to hide. That is, not go out in the street if you don't have to. So it's a simple survival thing. If you can't leave the house for a week while the police are scraping up one of these things, are you prepared to stay home for a week? You have everything you need, flashlights, you know, your medicines, your this or that or the other thing, a little bit of extra food, some water. There are lots of ways to attack the United States. I'm looking at attacking the power grid. I'm not sure that the next attack here will be the same attack. It will be maybe a different attack.
Well, last year you already had one of the first attacks on the power grid in attempted attacks on the power grid in California.
And they attack the grid for cell phones.
Mm-hmm.
So your communication, they get the computer system wound up. They've hacked things and shut them down. One of the interesting things that ran across, we'll address it next week, there was a statement from our friends at Anonymous.
Yes.
If you didn't see this, I didn't put it in the notes because it just happened. They came on with one of their anonymous warnings, you know, that the people that have screwed up all sorts of international companies and us, that they're going after ISIS and they are going to ruin their communications and plant bugs and screw up all their computers, which would be just wonderful.
Well, and one of the few times the anonymous folks that wear the Guy Fawkes masks, I'm on your side. Go for that. Leave the rest of us alone. Leave the power grid and our finances and everything else alone. But go after these guys.
And it turned most of the leadership they believe is French.
Yeah.
You know, and French in Belgium, where Anonymous has its main whatever they can't find.
Yeah.
And so hopefully they claim they've already done it and screwed up a lot of their stuff, but they are going now full force against everything ISIS they can touch, their financial systems, their websites, their everything. So that's good. It's nice to see some people joining together to fight this. The fact that if you can believe everything, that the Russians are actually now going to attack ISIS, and I believe they are, because ISIS killed that whole airplane full of people, and they now know that ISIS did it, and they know how they did it. They smuggled a bomb on board and blew that airliner in half and killed a couple hundred Russians.
The Russian Air Force, I just heard a report. The Russian Air Force did 2,800 sorties in 8 hours. That's a lot of bombing, and
because Putin is, as much as we dislike the guy for a lot of reasons, he said, "You killed our people. We are going to kill all of you." And the French have said the same thing. The Russians have a lot more ability to do it.
The French are moving one of the, I think maybe their only or one of their very few aircraft
carrier
in there. So it's going to get really bad in Syria and Iraq for ISIS, as it should be. We unfortunately have an administration, and I'm going to get on the soapbox one more time, and you can slap me if I'm getting too far afield. But we've got an administration that would like you to believe that there is nothing going on. I don't want to sound like an alarmist, but folks, they're about to bring this here. They've brought this here already from all the way back from Hassan Nadal, the former Army major who killed all those people in Fort Hood, Texas.
That was actually workplace violence. Yeah. I read that.
It's workplace violence. We have an administration that doesn't want to use the term terrorist. I saw Benjamin Rhodes, the international security advisor for President Obama, on an interview from Turkey, when he was asked, well, the day before the attacks, the presidents came out and said that ISIS was contained. And he goes, well, they're geographically contained. They're in Syria and Iraq. And we're going, well, that may be their home base and some of their stuff, but their ideologues are all over this country.
And all over the world.
Yes.
Last words there, Mr. Patrick?
Arm yourselves.
Yeah.
While you still can.
If there is such an attack, bear in mind that the police will be tied up doing everything. If you think there's a long response now when you call and say someone's trying to break into my house, wait till there's a terrorist incident on the Strip. You have to be able to defend yourself. We'll be back next week. We're running out of time. We'll stay a little bit on Facebook and finish up a couple of odds and ends. If you're listening to us on KSHP 1400 AM, I appreciate it. We'll be back next Tuesday. This show will be on YouTube. You can watch it, film of it. The video of it is going up on YouTube as we say it. Fired Up with Bob Irwin on the YouTube channel, iPads and whatever. You can get us anywhere. Thank you for listening if you're the radio guys. And we'll bid you good night. Hopefully we'll see you here again next week. I'm just continuing a little bit of the thought on YouTube. I'm not convinced personally the attack will be the same. Just recently in what they did walking in and shooting people. They did taking out an airliner. They did different things with different, but those were all direct action attacks with killing humans rather than electronic attacks, rather than, and if Anonymous can really screw with them, they may not be able to do an attack on.
It's going to be very difficult for them to do. What Anonymous is trying to do is they're not set up per se in a real infrastructure, say like a corporate or a government is. So they're spattered out through the internet. It'd be very difficult for them to do that. I think there's probably, knowing our intelligence services, I think that's already been going on.
Of course, they've been trying to disrupt it. And the communications they're doing on the encoded stuff back and forth is going to take some time to crack, if ever. The CIA seems to be very worried about not being able to intercept our communications.
Well, and one of the things that, and I know I'm going to get probably some hate mail from some of you out there, but the NSA collects that kind of data. I've always said, if you want to listen to my telephone call, please feel free. You're probably going to get very bored. I'm not out there trying to hurt someone. If you're out there trying to hurt someone and somebody's listening to your phone call, then you deserve to get what you get. I think everybody has to have their right to privacy, and I'm not saying that we should tear up the Bill of Rights and the Constitution to make us a safer world. But I do believe that, and I can tell you from personal experience of being in the field when the Patriot Act was enacted, that we stopped and disrupted a lot of potential terrorist attacks because of the ability the Patriot Act gave us. I know there's some people out there that believe that their phones are being tapped at all times, which it's absolutely not. Yeah, the clicking you hear is you've got a crappy phone. You don't have. It's not the telephone being tapped. But there is that fine line, and I'm not one to give up my rights, but I'm also one to say, hey, look, and it's not just because I'm a former federal agent. It's the fact that, hey, I live here. I have a family here. I want them to be safe. And if some guy in NSA who's not collecting your phone calls, by the way, he's collecting phone numbers and he's connecting them in a database to see who's calling who. And if they know this is Johnny Jihad and this guy over here who is Bobby Bomb Thrower, and all of a sudden they're talking, guess what, folks? That's what we call a clue. That's how these investigations get started.
And then they get a warrant.
And then they get a warrant, and then they listen to the phone, and then they listen to these guys, and they develop the information, and they arrest these guys. And we've done that countless times. You almost never hear about it. Within the first weeks after 9/11, there was 1,500 people that were arrested right after 9/11. Never heard anything else.
I think, didn't the governor of New Jersey claim credit for that?
Well, well, that was a little different thing. He kind of went soprano on them. But no, I mean, there were 1,500 people. Folks, we got the right 1,500 people. Okay? Those, as much as people go, the government, and I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not real happy with our justice, our Department of Justice right now. But, the reality of it is, they do a damn good job. The FBI is very good at what they do. The CIA, the NSA, the DSA, Homeland Security, shout out to my former brothers. the Border Patrol, the local police and the intelligence, they do a really good job. We've got to help them is what we've got to do. We've got to be able to give them something. It's called a lead. It's a clue.
And a commander-in-chief who actually believes there may be a threat to the United States.
I think that is the biggest problem, folks, is you're going to hear in the elections.
Clearly.
That in coming up from one side of the house, you're going to hear, well, we don't have to worry. We've antagonized these people because we've gone over there and we've put boots on the ground. If we just leave them alone.
They'll kill everybody in the entire area.
Yes.
The radicalized jihadi. And I had one of the greatest things I was ever able to do was to sit down with the & 2 guy in the public security division of the Jordan National Police. This is the #2 guy, and he sat down and I was in Jordan the day that Osama bin Laden had a visit from DevGru, and gave him a free helicopter ride out of there. He was very, very happy. He said, look, he said, we're Muslims. We're good people. He says, there are those people who pervert every religion, and he's absolutely 100% true, folks. Every religion has got blood on its hands. And he said, we try to keep people safe. We try to keep those people away from the rest of the world. And, they've got a very good, very difficult job. It was one of the greatest conversations I ever could have with this guy. And it wasn't about, I'm from a Christian country. I'm very spiritual. I'm not very religious. I don't go to church. Sorry, folks. I know that probably makes some of you think I'm as a bad guy, but I don't. I do believe in God, and I worship him in my own way, which is my right under the Constitution. But here's a man who had his own, he has his own religion. He's a righteous guy. He is protecting the souls of everybody in that country. That's his job. And he did it without any consideration about, oh, well, are you a Muslim, a Christian, a Jew, a Buddhist, whatever. And you've got to understand, these are people, these jihadis are people that will kill their own people. They've murdered kids. They've murdered women, children. You don't think for a second they won't come here to Las Vegas or to come to a town near you and get a gun or drive? We're talking about so much pedestrian traffic. What about Las Vegas Boulevard on a Saturday night and a speeding car off the road?
A tactic they're using in Israel all the time.
Yes.
We're going to have to get into the show here, Lenny.
Sorry, I got on my soapbox.
Well, that's why you're here, is because you've been there and done that and can articulate, having talked to the individuals and been around all this. I greatly appreciate you being here.
Appreciate the time.
We are going to be back next week, same time, same station. Thank you for listening to us on YouTube. We only went about 10 minutes over. It's
my fault. Sorry.
Well, it is.
Traffic. Sorry.
Maybe another show you can get another word in edgewise.
Maybe.
Wow, I finally beat an attorney out.
Thank you, folks. You have a good evening. We'll be back next week.